If you're watching this, chances are you're in one of two situations. Maybe you've already taken the SAT once or twice, watched a bunch of YouTube videos, solved hundreds of practice questions, and somehow your score barely moved. Or maybe you're just starting your SAT journey and you have absolutely no idea where to begin. Either way, you're probably wondering the same thing. What should I actually be doing to get a 1500 or even a 1550 plus? Because here's the reality. Most students don't have a work ethic problem. They have a direction problem. They spend hours studying, but they don't know what they should be studying or why they're studying it. They're jumping between random practice tests, random YouTube videos, random Reddit posts, and random study guides, hoping that eventually something clicks. Sometimes it does. Most of the time it doesn't. That's exactly why I made this video. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to show you the exact roadmap I would follow if my goal was to score a 1550 plus on the SAT, and not just what to study, but when to study it, why you're studying it, and how your strategy should change depending on where you're starting. Let me quickly introduce myself. I recently took the May SAT and scored nearly a perfect score on the math section, all without paying for an expensive SAT tutor. Before that, I also earned a perfect score on the PSA T-Math section. Since then, I've had the opportunity to help over 100 students prepare for the SAT through tutoring and schoolhouse.world. Everything I'm going to share throughout this series comes from the same system that helped me improve my own score and that I've seen work for other students as well. Not just what to study, but when to study it, why you're studying it, and how your strategy should change depending on where you're starting. One thing I want to make clear before we start, this isn't just one video, it's the beginning of an entire series. Today's video is the roadmap. The videos after this are where we'll dive into every individual piece. By the end of this series, you'll have a complete SAT system, not just a collection of random tips. Now, let's actually build your roadmap. Just like almost anything else in life, the first step isn't working harder, it's knowing where you're going. Every roadmap is made up of three things: a goal, a timeline, and a strategy. When you combine those three things together, you have a plan that actually tells you what to do every single day. Let's build one together. Imagine you're taking the August SAT. You start studying on July 1st. That gives you roughly 52 days before test day. Now, let's say your most recent SAT score was a 1350. Your goal is a 1550. That's a 200-point improvement. Now, here's where most students make their biggest mistake. They assume every point is earned the same way. It's not. The strategy that takes someone from a 1200 to a 1400 is completely different from the strategy that takes someone from a 1450 to a 1550. If you're in roughly that 1200 to 1450 range, most of your improvement comes from building stronger foundations, learning the core math concepts, learning the core English concepts, understanding the patterns that the SAT repeats over and over again, and learning how to apply those foundations consistently on test day. That's where the biggest gains come from. But once you're already scoring around a 1450, the game changes. At that point, you probably know almost all of the content. You're no longer trying to learn new algebra. You're trying to eliminate mistakes. You're trying to master difficult Module 2 questions. You're trying to improve your reading accuracy. You're optimizing your timing. You're refining your strategy until every point counts. So even though both students are trying to improve their scores, they're solving completely different problems. And that's exactly why having a roadmap matters, because without one, you end up studying the wrong things for your current score level. In the next section, let's zoom into math and break down the exact 7 pillars that I believe every student should master on the road to an 800.
So before we jump into an actual SAT problem, I want to show you the workflow I use on almost every math question. Every problem starts with the exact same process. First, you need to understand the foundations behind the concept being tested. If you don't know the underlying math, no shortcut or strategy is going to save you. Once you understand the foundations, the next step is recognizing the pattern. Instead of asking, "How do I solve this?" ask yourself, "What type of SAT problem is this?" High scorers recognize these patterns almost instantly. Once you've identified the pattern, you choose the fastest workflow. Sometimes that's solving it by hand. Sometimes it's using Desmos. The goal isn't to use Desmos for everything. The goal is to solve every problem as efficiently as possible. Then, after applying that workflow, you arrive at the answer. This is the exact process we're going to repeat over and over throughout this entire series. Now, let me show you exactly what I mean. At first glance, this looks like a pretty intimidating advanced math question. You have an exponential function, 2 intercepts, and it's asking for one of the parameters. Most students would immediately start doing pages of algebra. And yes, that works. But on the digital SAT, there's often a much faster way. Since we already understand the foundations behind exponential functions, we recognize the pattern. This is simply asking us to determine the values of the parameters in an exponential model. Instead of solving everything manually, I'm going to use Desmos. First, I'll enter the 2 points into a table. The x-intercept is 2, 0. The y-intercept is 0, negative 323. Next, I'll create a custom regression model using the equation y 1 tilde a to the power of x1 plus b. Desmos now fits the exponential function to those 2 points and solves for the regression parameters automatically. From there, I can simply read off the value of b, which is exactly what the SAT is asking for. The entire process takes only a few seconds. Compare that to solving this algebraically, which could easily take 1 or 2 minutes. Now, if that Desmos workflow looked completely new to you, don't worry. You're not expected to know advanced techniques like custom regressions yet. In fact, I'll dedicate an entire video to Desmos, where we'll cover everything from the basics all the way to workflows like this one, along with even harder SAT problems. For now, I just wanted to show you what's possible. The biggest takeaway isn't the regression itself, it's understanding the workflow. Learn the foundations, recognize the pattern, choose the fastest method, then execute. That's the system that consistently produces high SAT math scores. So that's the math side of the SAT. Now let's talk about reading and writing. In my opinion, this section is actually the opposite of math. Math is generally much easier to improve. Reading is much harder to master. And the reason is pretty simple. Math follows formulas. Reading follows language. You can't memorize a formula for every reading question the same way you can for algebra or geometry. Instead, you have to learn how the SAT thinks. One thing I noticed while studying is that the SAT asks the same types of reading questions over and over again. The wording changes, the passages change, the topics change, but the underlying patterns stay surprisingly similar. Once you start recognizing those patterns, the reading section becomes much less intimidating. For most students trying to score somewhere around a 700 to 750, the goal is actually very similar to math. You first need to build strong foundations. Then you learn the patterns that appear throughout the test. Finally, you apply the right strategy consistently on every question. Those 3 things alone can take you a long way. But once you're trying to reach that elite 750 to 800 range, everything changes again. At that point, you're usually not missing questions because you don't know grammar, you're missing questions because of tiny mistakes. Maybe you rushed through a passage. Maybe you misunderstood the relationship between 2 sentences. Maybe 2 answer choices both looked correct. Or maybe the SAT used a subtle trick that you didn't recognize. Those are the things that separate a very good reading score from a nearly perfect one. So if someone asked me, what foundations should I actually learn for reading and writing, I'd tell them to master these 5 areas: reading comprehension, vocabulary and craft, logic and argumentation, data and evidence, and grammar and writing. Those 5 foundations make up almost everything you'll see on the digital SAT reading and writing section. Once you understand those foundations, the next step is exactly the same as math. Recognize the pattern, choose the right strategy, then execute. Let me show you exactly what I mean. At first glance, this looks like a difficult vocabulary question. Take the time to read through this. And most students immediately think, well, I either know the word or I don't. But that's actually not how I approach these questions. Instead of looking at the answer choices first, I look at the passage. The key phrase here is the tension among his influences. That one word, tension, tells us almost everything we need to know. Now let's look at those influences. We have classic European portraiture, American pop art, and an intertribal painting style that rejects depth and perspective. Those don't sound similar at all. They're pulling in completely different directions. So whatever goes in the blank has to describe things that are very different from one another. Now let's eliminate. Choice A, complementary. Complementary means things work well together. That doesn't create tension. Gone. Choice B, unknown. The passage literally tells us what the influences are. Gone. Choice D, interchangeable. That means they can replace one another. These art styles are clearly distinct. Gone. That leaves choice C, disparate. Now here's the interesting part. I don't actually know exactly what disparate means, but I don't have to. I've already proven that it's the only answer that fits the relationship in the passage. After checking the definition, disparate simply means fundamentally different or distinct, which is exactly what we predicted. One last trick. Whenever you're stuck on vocabulary, pay attention to familiar roots and word parts. Sometimes they give away the meaning. But even if they don't, mapping the relationships in the passage and eliminating aggressively will get you to the correct answer far more often than trying to memorize thousands of vocabulary words. That's how I approach vocabulary questions on the digital SAT. Now let's take everything we've talked about so far and apply it to two real students. Because one of the biggest mistakes I see is students copying someone else's study plan. The reality is, the best strategy depends on where you're starting. Let's imagine student 1. They're currently scoring somewhere around a 1200 to 1300. Their goal is a 1450. Now let's compare that to student 2. They're already scoring around a 1450. Their goal is a 1550 plus. Both students have exactly 60 days until the digital SAT. But here's the interesting part. They're solving completely different problems. Student 1 needs to build, student 2 needs to refine. Those are two very different strategies. So let's start with student 1. During the first 20 days, I would focus almost entirely on foundations. Grind Khan Academy. Study books like the Black Book. Make sure every major math and reading concept actually makes sense. Don't worry about speed yet. Just build the foundation. Then, during days 20 through 40, start learning strategy. Watch quality YouTube videos. Join free tutoring sessions on schoolhouse.world. Or work with a tutor. Now you're learning how to apply everything you just learned. Finally, days 40 through 60 are all about execution. Start grinding the SAT question bank. Mix together everything you've learned. Desmos, reading strategies, grammar, math. Aim for around 5 to 15 quality questions per section each day. And every Saturday, take a full-length practice test. Then on Sunday, don't just check your score. Analyze every mistake. Figure out what went wrong. Then adjust your strategy for the following week. Now let's look at student 2. This student already knows almost all the content. So spending weeks relearning algebra probably isn't the best use of their time. Instead, days 0 through 20 should be spent grinding hard question bank problems. Every mistake should go into a deep error log. Study every missed question until you understand exactly why you missed it. Build your own strategies for the hardest Module 2 problems. Days 20 through 40, learn from the best. Watch high-quality strategy videos. Work with elite tutors. Learn from top scorers on schoolhouse.world. But keep grinding difficult problems at the same time. You're trying to build an edge. Then during the final 20 days, everything becomes refinement. Improve your timing. Have a plan for what to do when you get stuck. Develop a workflow for every major question type. This is where scores like 1520 become 1550. And just like Student 1, every Saturday is a practice test. Every Sunday is an analysis day. The difference is, Student 2 isn't just trying to improve. They're trying to make the next practice test even cleaner than the last one. So hopefully you can see why there isn't one perfect study plan. The roadmap depends on your current score, but the system stays exactly the same. Set your goal, build your timeline, create the right strategy. Then keep practicing, analyzing, and refining. Do that consistently, and your score will take care of itself.
So let's quickly recap everything we covered today. We started by building a roadmap. Every successful SAT study plan starts with 3 things: a goal, a timeline, and a strategy. Then we broke down the 7 pillars of SAT math and how Desmos can become one of your biggest advantages when you know how to use it correctly. After that, we talked about reading and writing. Instead of simply reading passages over and over again, we focused on recognizing patterns, understanding the relationships between words and sentences, and applying the right strategy. Finally, we brought everything together by building 2 different study plans. One for students building their foundations, and another for students chasing those elite 1550 plus scores. Hopefully one thing became clear throughout this video. Scoring higher on the SAT isn't about studying harder, it's about studying smarter. Building systems, recognizing patterns, and continuously refining your approach. In the next video, we're diving deep into SAT math. I'll be breaking down my complete 7-pillar math system. We'll cover the exact foundations you need, the Desmos shortcuts that save valuable time, the advanced patterns that appear over and over again, hard Module 2 questions, and the exact playbook I used to score nearly a perfect math section. If you're serious about maximizing your score, you won't want to miss it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the rest of the series. I'm going to be covering every major topic on the digital SAT, from math foundations all the way to advanced reading strategies. And if you'd like even more help, you can sign up for my free newsletter. You'll also receive 5 free SAT resources to help you study more effectively. If you're looking for personalized support, I also offer private one-on-one tutoring, elite small group classes, and introductory group classes for students at every level. You can find all of that at mus-tutoring.com or reach out to me directly at mus.sat.tutoring@gmail.com. Thank you so much for watching. I genuinely hope this roadmap gave you a clearer direction for your SAT journey. Good luck with your studying, and I'll see you in the next video.